Hello, what's up YouTube photographer Ronix with another retouching tutorial, and in this tutorial I want to show you how you're going to easily understand frequency separation from the very start to the very end. So in this tutorial you're basically not going to be using any actions or shortcuts, and want to understand frequency separation as a skin retouching technique from the very start to the very end. So I hope you stick around and enjoy this wonderful and insightful tutorial. And if at all this is what you have always yearned for or looked for, make sure to hit the like button on this video so that YouTube can push and recommend this video to many photographers or retouchers out there, or people interested in learning how to do skin retouching with Photoshop itself. So right now we are in Photoshop and I'm using Photoshop 2020. So what we want to understand, frequency separation is a skin retouching technique that is basically going to divide the image into two frequencies. By frequencies, I mean it's going to divide the image into the high frequency layer and the low frequency layer. Usually in the high frequency layer, we have textures, and in the low frequency layer, we have the skin tones or the colors of an image. So we're just going to go ahead and create those two layers by pressing Ctrl Command J on the keyboard twice to create those two layers, and you're going to double click to rename this into low, or some people call it the color layer. Then we're going to name this into high, or some people call it the texture layer. So I have put both names so that you don't get lost as you're trying to learn skin retouching. So basically what we do when it comes to frequency separation, we select the low frequency layer, and remember this low frequency layer, we only want to remain with the colors and not the texture. So you select it and click right here to hide the texture layer. And with the low frequency layer now selected, you're simply going to come to filter right here, and you're going to come to blur and come to Gaussian blur. So this is going to enable us really fade out the textures from the skin. So you have to use these options for zooming in and out, and you look for an area that seems to have more or prominent skin textures than the rest of the skin area. So this can be a good reference point, or usually right here on the nose area. So we want to start blurring out up to a point when these details are just starting to get lost completely from the image. So come to the radius and simply left click and start moving the radius up. So this figure shouldn't be crammed as we are using it, because your images may be having different levels of details or skin textures or different levels of sharpness. So we are going to basically start moving this up to a point when we're just starting to lose out on the textures in the image. So we have to stop at that point. So at around 7, that is when I'm just starting to lose out on the details. So you can click right here to hover around and you look at the image in the preview option, and you can see that all the textures have been completely lost out from the image, and just come and hit OK. So that is going to make this low frequency layer blurry, and is not going to be having any details or textures in it. So after we have done that, we're going to do the opposite, and this time around we only want to remain with the textures in the high frequency. So just come and select it and now activate it. And right now we're going to come to image, and we're going to come to apply image. So when you come to apply image, it's going to open up the apply image window, and what we have to do basically, we're going to come right here and come and select the low frequency. The reason for selecting it, we want to extract the textures that we temporarily eliminated from the low frequency layer, and we now paste them into the high frequency layer. That is why we have selected the low frequency layer. And make sure the channel is RGB. So for the blending, we have to come and make sure we select. So this blending really depends on the bit depth of the image. Usually we have 8 or 16 bit images. So the blend mode is going to really be different for your images. So if I told you have 8 right here, these are the settings I'm going to show you right now. So for the blend mode, if I told you have 8, meaning your image is going to be 8-bit, come and change the blend mode to subtract, and make sure the opacity is 100%. Preserve transparency and mask are not checked. Make sure that these options don't have ticks right here, and make sure the scale is 2 and offset 128, and make sure the invert option is not turned on. Then with the preview turned on, you can see that the textures, if at all I'm to zoom in, the textures are going to be on this gray kind of layer, which is going to be lacking colors, meaning we have successfully conducted or separated the textures from the low frequency layer. But if at all you have a 16-bit image like I have in this case, the blend mode is going to be add, and now the opacity is 100%, preserve transparency and mask are not checked in this case, and right now the scale has to be 2 and offset at 0. But this time around, make sure you turn on the invert option, and you'll have the textures on this gray kind of layer. So after that, we're just going to simply click on OK, and now this layer has textures, but right now we want a blend mode that is going to reveal back our image that it was meant to be. So just come to normal right here and change the blend mode from normal to linear light, and you'll get back the textures or the details the way they are meant to be within the image. So we want to put these two in a group. Like I said, there shouldn't be a difference between the separated image and our initial background image. So select both layers, and you can drag them into the folder icon, put them in a group, or you can simply press Ctrl or Command G on the keyboard to put them in a group. Double click right there, and you can name the group to frequency separation. So when I turn, sorry about my spelling, so when I turn this on and off, you can see there is no difference between the initial background image and our frequency separation image. So basically, if at all I turn off the background layer, you can see that we still have the same image, but when I open up the folder, it has been divided into the colors and the textures, but when you combine both, they make up the same image. So right now we are done doing this, and right now we are done separating the frequencies. So we want to work on either the colors or the textures, and we perfect them individually. So what we want to do, first of all, we want to work on the colors. So we want to blend or even out the color transition so that they can be smooth, and we have a seamless transition between the colors or the skin tones. By seamless, I mean, if at all I'm to zoom in, you can start to have uneven transitions right here. We have some part of highlights in these areas, and you can see right here we have some dark spot right here. Just look below the lip right here. We have those inconsistencies within the color patterns in the skin tone. So what we want to do, basically, we're going to come and we select the low frequency layer, and after selecting it, remember, if at all you want to work on the colors and refine them, we select the layer that contains the colors. After we have done that, we're going to come under the brushes, simply right click, and we get the mixer brush tool. But if at all you're using a slightly old version of Photoshop, you can find your mixer brush tool right there. So after selecting the mixer brush tool, these are settings that you have to use. So we're going to go through all those settings right now. So make sure the brush settings are hardness at 0, and make sure the brush is clean, because we don't want the brush to contain any random colors. Then we have two options right here. One which is saying load the brush after each and every stroke right here, meaning as you're working on the image and you paint right here, the brush is going to be containing the color, and you can easily drag it and drop it on another area, which is going to look weird and which we don't want to happen. Then the other option is doing the opposite, which is going to clean the brush, because as you are mixing or blending the transitions within the skin tone, we want the brush to be cleaned automatically by Photoshop. So you're basically going to select the option which says clean the brush after each and every stroke. Then right now the weight we're going to be using is 9%, the load of 75%, the mix at 90%, and the flow of 100%. So always make sure sample all layers is not checked, because when you check on this option, or when you check it and you try using the mixer brush tool, it means that it is going to be painting textures back in the low frequency. Let me show you this in a bit. So if at all I'm to paint on the forehead, you can see it has as well painted textures in the forehead area in the color layer, which we don't want. So I'm just going to undo that. So after you have done this, make sure sample always is not checked, because we only want to work with the low frequency layer or the colors in the low frequency layer. So right now we are done setting up our mixer brush tool, and the next thing we want to do is going ahead and retouching or blending the color transitions in the skin tone. So in order to see these transitions quite better, turn off the texture or high frequency layer, and you are now going to be looking at the colors the way they are meant to be. So how to use the mixer brush tool? Make sure that the caps lock is not turned on, because when it is on, it is going to make your mixer brush tool as a cross icon, which you don't want. So make sure you turn off the caps lock key. And in order to increase or decrease on the size of the mixer brush tool, you can use the open and close brackets on the keyboard to play around with different sizes of the mixer brush tool. Then also, if at all you want to zoom in or zoom out on the image when you're retouching, you can use a shortcut of Ctrl plus on the keyboard. That is going to zoom in. Or if at all you're using Mac, you can use Command plus. And zooming out, you can use Command or Ctrl minus. So right now, when you're retouching, one tip I have to give you: always make sure you retouch at the distance, because when you try zooming all the way in, you won't see the uneven skin tone transitions within the image. So always make sure you retouch your images at a distance. So retouch at a reasonable distance so that you can see the uneven or inconsistent skin tone transitions within your image. So after that, come how to use the mixer brush tool. Make sure it is slightly smaller than the area you're going to work on, and come to that area and simply left click and hold down, and you move the mixer brush tool in the direction of the area you're trying to work on. So basically that is how you can use the mixer brush tool to blend or even out the transitions. So I'm just going to come. So basically we are trying to mix colors that are looking similar or alike within the image, so that they can really have a transition that is looking nice, seamless, and better. But as you're using this technique, remember we turned off the texture layer. You always have to come and make sure that the more plastic the image is looking, the better the results. So remember, if at all you applied a good Gaussian blur, it means the textures are going to remain intact. So when I come and I turn on the texture layer in this case, you can see that we still have the textures intact within the skin. So I'm just going to come and turn off the texture layer, and still with the low frequency layer selected, I'm going to continue working on the image just like that. And this is going to give me a better look or result. Remember, I'm retouching at a distance, and how to use the mixer brush tool. I'm basically left clicking and moving my brush strokes in the way a given area has been shaped. For example, on the forehead area, you can see it is moving in this direction. So the strokes of a mixer brush tool have to move in this or follow the direction of an area that I'm trying to work on. So basically that is how you can use the mixer brush tool to retouch or refine the skin tone transitions in the image. So let me just work on this quick, because I don't want to do more of the talking, because you may get bored along the way. So just try to do a very fast and quick job in this case. So reduce on the size, and I work on a slightly small area. So I'm just mixing colors that are looking alike, and while they are trying to transition from one area to another, I'm mixing that border and getting a better and smoother transition. So I'm just going to retouch right on the nose area, mix the highlight alone right there, reduce on the size, and I work on this other side that has midtones and shadows. So basically that is how you can perfectly retouch and use your mixer brush tool. So if at all you want to check on the progress as you're retouching, turn on the texture layer, and you can see the before and after for the retouching. Let me zoom in. You can see before, after. You can see the textures are still intact, but we have refined the skin tone colors. So you can as well come and work on the neck area. Turn this off and mix colors in the neck area. Remember, when you're doing skin retouching, always and always make sure you work on every area that is showing skin. You don't want to be a careless retoucher that always forgets or leaves out some areas that have skin. Every area that is displaying or showing skin has to be worked on in this case. So I'm going to work right there and also come this hand, this other side, and also mix and blend the transitions in that arm or hand area. But like I said, we turn off the texture so that you can see the inconsistencies within the transitions in the skin tone, and we are going to really have a better image at the end of the use of the Mr. Brush tool. So right now we are done retouching the image using the Mr. Brush tool, and I'm just going to turn on the texture layers to show you the before and after, before after. So one other trick that I tend to use when I'm using the Mr. Brush tool is after I have applied it, I simply come to the image and I apply one more final technique, that is using the lasso tool. So I come and get the lasso tool and make sure the feathering is 22 pixels and it is in new selection mode, and this helps me to fine tune the areas I may have missed out when I was using the mixer brush tool to even out the transition. So this time around I zoom all the way in and come and I make a selection. So as you're making this selection, you always have to follow the shape of an area and always have to restrict from selecting the eyebrows or the edges of the face or the skin. So come to filter, blur, and come to Gaussian blur, and this time around move the radius. This is what we had initially before, 7. So move it up to the point when you have a nice skin texture for your image. So at around 7, at around 21 rather, that is when I have a nice skin texture. So the trick I can share with you, a hack that you can use, the radius that you use for your frequency separation blur radius, just simply multiply it by 3 and type in the values. That I guarantee is going to have you get the best skin texture. So 7 by 3 is 21. So whichever radius you may have used, just type in that value or just multiply it by 3 and type in the value and simply hit OK. So when you're using this, or when it comes to using this step, simply zoom in because you have to make a precise selection and you apply your Gaussian blur to those areas. So basically this is how to use the lasso tool, and when you feel like you have applied it too much on a given area, simply right click on the selection and come to fade Gaussian blur and simply reduce the opacity of that effect. So that is how to use our, so in order to deselect, simply click away from the selection and it's going to automatically deselect because we are in new selection mode. So that is how to use our lasso tool to refine the skin in this case. So I'm just going to right click and apply it, come to this chin area. So usually I use the lasso tool on only the face area, and I'll use the Mr. Brush tool on the lower parts of the body. So right now we are now done using this. So when it comes to the nose area, always make sure that you apply it on only the darkest areas and you don't apply it on this middle part. And when it comes to the nose area, apply it on the sides alone and don't select the whole nose, because when you do this and you apply it on the overall nose and you apply the Gaussian blur, it is going to flatten out the nose and it's going to make it look big and not flattering at all. So make sure you don't apply it onto the overall nose. So we are now done retouching the image. So if at all you want to remove blemishes, simply select the high frequency layer because that layer has textures, and zoom in your image. Get the clone stamp tool because this is what I prefer to remove blemishes, and come. I use a hardness of 0, opacity and the flat 100%. Sample is current layer, and simply hold on the alternate key on the keyboard or option and left click close the blemish and simply click over the blemish. So that is how I remove blemishes using the clone stamp tool, and this is going to perfect the image. So after you have cleaned up the blemishes or removed the blemishes from your image, The next thing that you want to do is doing a little bit of eye and teeth whitening. So how to do this? Simply come right to your adjustments and come to hue and saturation, and after that just come to the saturation and drop it all the way down to up to around -86 until it desaturates the image, and make sure the white layer mask is selected and press Ctrl or Command I on the keyboard. That is going to invert the effect. Come under the brushes, right click and get the brush tool, and simply make sure the hardness is 0. The mode is normal, opacity and the flat 100%. Make sure you have black and white right here, and you can reset by clicking on these two small boxes. So you can switch between black and white by using X on the keyboard to make white as the foreground color, or you can use this arrow right there and zoom all the way in by using Ctrl Command plus on the keyboard. So after you have done that, you can now increase on the size by using the bracket keys on the keyboard, and you can simply, using a white brush, paint on the white area to whiten the eyes, and you can do the same for the teeth. So if at all you make a mistake, you can switch back to X and you erase the effect from the area you may have done the mistake, and you can switch back by using X on the keyboard, and you can now do your eye and teeth whitening. So basically we are now done whitening the eyes. So right now we want to save the image after retouching it. So in order to save the nicely retouched image, simply come to File right here and come to Export and come to Export As. So in order to export a very nice and sharp image that is not going to change in color, this is the right way to export your images. Remember, you have been doing various adjustments, and Photoshop sometimes may get a little bit confused on the color profile that you want to use. So make sure the file settings, the format is JPEG, quality at 100% right here, and make sure resample is by cubic sharper, because we want Photoshop to slightly sharpen the image for us during the process of saving it, and we want a very sharp image after saving or retouching it. So after we have done this, make sure the color space is convert to sRGB and also embed color profile. So with this, you won't run into any issues of your photo changing in color when you post it or when you put it on another device. So after you have done this and your photo is done loading in this preview window, you can come and simply hit on the export button, and you look for an area. You can just hit export and you look for a location where you want to save the image and simply hit save. So basically this is how to retouch your images in Photoshop from the very start to the very end. And if at all you have found the video helpful and insightful, make sure that you hit the like button on this video so that YouTube can push and recommend this video to many people out there. Ronnix from ronnixphotography. Thank you for watching, and see you in yet more amazing tutorials. And don't forget to keep practicing and also keep creating.